Graydon, I'm glad you responded to my video. You asked a question of where do we go from here, and the problem is that I'm trying to answer it, and that's hard. Um, so I'm just going to get right to it. On the issue of conformity, you make a very good point, I think, here. Division does become self-defeating, and I think perhaps we atheists have to consider that we can't have our cake and eat it too. I mean, if we reject unification, then we can't expect to wield any kind of power that comes from unification and won't gain any consequential respect from, I mean, if that's what we're after. I mean, I take just an issue with one sentence you made in your last video. That's that power is not the ultimate goal. Actually, I think it is a very necessary sub-goal. I mean, we want to wield influence. I think that should be I mean, that's really what we gain from uniformity. Is some kind of influence, which equates to some kind of power. But it's a minor quibble. I mean, it could be semantic. But anyways, the blasphemy challenge also created a brief unification, at least brief. And I've noticed that people have been putting the sentence "I deny the Holy Spirit" in their comment signatures, or at least some people have been doing that. And I think that, you know, is this a meme? Is this something that's, I don't know, we have to think about that. But you know, we've seen people also come together behind, you know, Dawkins and Harris's books. They've been speaking at functions, and they've made they made it to the talk shows. But beyond anti-belief, do we have other unifying principles? I mean, you made actually a very provocative and good statement. I mean, you said pure logic is infallible, and that's a great statement because it is so provocative. Your instant reaction to that is, now wait a minute, it's infallible? Because that's usually reserved for the Almighty, isn't it? But you realize that that statement is technically correct. Pure logic is infallible. So is that a good unifying principle, or do we need more substance than that? Another example of a unifying principle for disparate people, at least in the U.S., is the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all the fixes we did, and the amendments and the fixes we did to it, which were very important, of course. But anyways, the point is just that Americans are so diverse, and yet we tend to defend the Constitution, if nothing else. Maybe the indigenous people don't like it very much, but anyway, so those are just sort of my initial thoughts about unification or unifying principles. But I think it's interesting that believers, in some ways, can be more accepting of their membership into their groups than us atheists sometimes. I mean, I know that you made some comments about how some atheists have really questioned your gang involvement. Well, here's the bonus. The atheist church can't kick you out, and we can't excommunicate you. So, I personally, I'm actually quite intrigued by your gang and your prior gang involvement. I mean, challenging our notions and stereotypes is I mean, it's something we atheists really have to deal with. I mean, I think it's hypocritical for us to criticize, or for any atheist to be criticizing you based on what is essentially our narrow view. Like, what do we? You obviously know more about gang life than most of us, and I don't think we should criticize unless we know. And in a sense, that's what the believers are doing to us, right? They whatever, they criticize us, usually based on false misconceptions about us. But this sort of leads into something else. I mean, I've been watching your Atheist Nation video series, and I really enjoy them, I gotta tell you. I think the a big reason why they're so good and so effective is because you're storytelling. And I think all lasting cultures, bringing it back to the atheist culture idea, has storytelling in it. And so I think we have to engage in that more. And you're also, you made a comment that we're all part of a gang, and yeah, I mean, I'm a very anti-conformist person, so I normally reject the idea that I'm part of some gang. But I have to be honest with myself. First of all, that rejectionism does cause some kind of personal isolation. But what ends up happening is I throw my support behind political candidates every now and then. So, I can't say I'm not part of some gang. So I think the right balance is to perhaps, maybe say that club membership is not so bad. It's just the mob mentality and indoctrination that often results from it, which is bad. But I mean, if there's any group of people who can avoid that, it should be us atheists. Okay, then there's the question of war, and so I'm going to try and weave together the culture and war questions. Is culture a necessary precursor to engaging in direct warfare, or should the two be developed at the same time? Maybe that's not really the best questions, but I mean, I have to concede that there are battles going on in the sense that the believers are attacking us, and you rightly cite that, and you can just look through the YouTube videos, sorts of responses by these guys, and they're just, yeah, they are attacking us. But if it's a war, then what is at stake, and how do we define victory? I'm going to put forward an idea for what would be victory, and that is basic respect in the general discourse in the media. If we achieve that, I think that would be a kind of victory. And so I put that as a question then. Is that what we're fighting for? Would that be essentially the thing that we are struggling to achieve? But to expand a little more on this war analogy, I mean, I'd like to actually draw an analogy of our movement, possibly with MLK, Malcolm X, and Louis Farrakhan, and like all analogies that are imperfect, but what I would say amongst those three, that Martin Luther King was the most effective, and primarily that's because he engaged white people. Right. Well, I mean, Malcolm X and Louis Farrakhan are very effective, but they mostly were talking to black people. Martin Luther King, I think, was more inclusive both of black people and white people, because white people would go on some of these marches with him, right? But in any event, it's an imperfect analogy. But I try to put myself in the mind of those who posted to the blasphemy challenge for the first time, and I asked, do they come here to fight a war against believers? Actually, I think that's an open question, because the I deny the Holy Spirit thing is an act of defiance, so maybe we all are in it to fight a battle. So I want to just leave with a statement of 4 possible principles that that could be unifying for us. And the first is that there is something like an online war going on, and we have to acknowledge it, and our choice is to engage in it or not. The second would be that storytelling is important, and the first story that every atheist should tell is how they became an atheist. The third is Paul Doman's current railing against dictionary definitions. That is, we have to challenge the misconceptions that society has been put onto us directly. And the fourth is a principle I'm going to add to myself, and that is that good questions are more important than bad answers. And that we have to remind ourselves that our minds are more open to growth when we're asking questions. Anyway, those are my thoughts.